The massive radio dishes at the Deep Space Communication Array in Nevada turned slowly in the desert heat, searching the endless darkness for signals from distant stars. Dr. Lisa Park sat in the control room, watching green lines dance across her computer screen as the equipment listened to whispers from space. She had been doing this job for 8 years, and most days brought nothing but cosmic background noise and the occasional signal from human satellites. Today felt different. At 3:47 in the afternoon, the computers started making sounds Lisa had never heard before. A steady beeping filled the room as data flooded across her screens faster than she could read it. The signal was coming from the direction of Proxima Centauri, the closest star to Earth with planets that might support life. Lisa grabbed her headset and called her team. "Hey, I need everyone in here right now. We're getting something big from Proxima." Within minutes, the control room filled with scientists and technicians. Dr. Sam Rodriguez, the team's expert on alien languages, looked at the incoming data with wide eyes. "This isn't random noise," he said, pointing at patterns on the screen. "Look at these repeating sequences. This is definitely a constructed language." The signal came in bursts, like someone desperately trying to send a message through static. Lisa and her team worked for hours, running the data through every translation program they had. Slowly, words began to emerge from the chaos. "Help" was the first word they decoded, then dying and war and please. By midnight, they had enough pieces to understand the basic message. The signal came from beings called the Kaleri, who lived on a water-covered planet orbiting Proxima Centauri. They were under attack by something called the Vorthek Empire, and their world was being destroyed. But the most shocking part came when Dr. Rodriguez decoded a section that made everyone in the room go silent. The aliens were asking specifically for help from Earth. They called humans Deathworlders, and said that stories of human warriors had spread across the galaxy. Lisa picked up her secure phone and called Commander Jake Rivers at the United Earth Defense Force headquarters in Colorado. She had met Rivers 5 years ago during the first contact protocols training, and she knew he would take this seriously. "Commander, we have a situation," Lisa said when Rivers answered. "We're receiving what appears to be a distress call from an alien civilization, and they're asking for our military help." The line went quiet for a long moment. "Are you certain this isn't some kind of hoax or equipment malfunction?" "Sir, I've checked everything 3 times. This signal is definitely coming from Proxima Centauri, and the language patterns are too complex to be fake. These beings know about humans, and they specifically want our help in a war," Rivers told her to send him everything immediately and to keep the discovery classified until further notice. Within an hour, military vehicles were heading toward the Nevada facility. Commander Rivers arrived at dawn with a team of analysts and security personnel. He was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes who had spent 30 years preparing for the possibility of alien contact. As Lisa played the decoded portions of the message, his expression grew more concerned. The Kaleri message painted a terrifying picture. The Vorthek Empire was a militaristic society that conquered planets by strip-mining them of all valuable resources. They had already destroyed 3 peaceful civilizations in the Proxima region, and the Kaleri were the last ones fighting back. "They mention that other species call us Deathworlders," Dr. Rodriguez explained to Rivers. "From what we can understand, most intelligent life in the galaxy evolved on worlds with stable climates and few natural dangers. Earth, with its extreme weather, earthquakes, predators, and diseases, is considered one of the most dangerous planets that still supports life." "And they think this makes us good warriors?" Rivers asked. "More than that, sir. They seem to believe that surviving on Earth has made humans the most dangerous fighters in known space. There are references to early human exploration ships that encountered other species. Apparently, our reputation has spread." Rivers studied the translated text for hours. The Kaleri were offering advanced technology in exchange for military assistance. They had water purification systems that could turn any liquid into pure drinking water, and medical knowledge that could eliminate most human diseases. But they needed soldiers, and they needed them fast. The message also included disturbing video footage that the Kaleri had managed to transmit. The images showed massive gray ships hanging in space above a blue world, firing bright beams down. At the surface, cities disappeared in flashes of light, and the ocean itself seemed to boil where the weapons hit. By evening, Rivers was on a secure video call with President Helen Carter and the Global Defense Council. The president was a former military officer who understood the implications immediately. "How long do these aliens have?" she asked after reviewing the intelligence. "Based on their message, maybe a few months before their defenses collapse completely," Rivers replied. "They're asking us to bring warships and ground forces. They seem to think we can fight these Vorthak in ways that other species cannot." Secretary of Defense Maria Lopez appeared skeptical. "This could be a trap. How do we know these Kaleri are telling the truth? Maybe they're the aggressors and they want to use human forces for conquest?" Dr. Park, who had been invited to join the call, spoke up. "Ma'am, we've been monitoring space for decades. If there was a militaristic empire nearby, we would have detected their communications by now. The energy signatures in the Kaleri footage match nothing in our databases, which suggests these Vorthak really are from outside our local region." General Ryan Scott, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. "If these aliens are right about human capabilities, then we might be the only ones who can stop this empire from expanding toward Earth. Better to fight them there than wait for them to come here." The debate continued for hours. Some council members worried about the risks of interstellar war, while others argued that humanity had a moral obligation to help species facing extinction. President Carter listened to all viewpoints before making her decision. "We've always known that our first contact with aliens might not be peaceful," she said finally. "If these Kaleri are telling the truth, then the Vorthak Empire represents a threat not just to them but potentially to Earth as well. I'm authorizing General Scott to begin mobilization procedures for an expeditionary force." The order that went out that night changed everything. Across Earth, military bases received classified instructions to begin preparing for humanity's first interstellar war. The message was simple. Earth was going to answer the call for help from the stars. In Nevada, Lisa Park looked up at the night sky and wondered what they were getting themselves into. Somewhere out there, an alien species was counting on the legendary ferocity of Deathworld warriors to save them from extinction. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. 3 months after President Carter's decision, Luna Base had transformed into the largest military construction site in human history. Admiral Kate Thompson stood in the command center watching thousands of workers race to complete the Earth defense fleet before time ran out for the Kaleri. The moon's low gravity allowed them to build ships far larger than anything possible on Earth, and the lack of atmosphere meant they could test weapons without worrying about environmental damage. Thompson had been chosen to lead the mission because of her experience commanding deep space operations and her reputation for thinking outside normal military doctrine. She was known for winning battles through unexpected tactics, which seemed perfect for fighting aliens who had never faced human forces before. The flagship of the new fleet was the UES Guardian, a massive vessel over 2 kilometers long and armed with the most advanced weapons humanity could build. Captain Alex Miller had been selected to command the Guardian after distinguishing himself in the Mars colony defense exercises. His crew of 3,000 included specialists from every branch of Earth's military, all volunteers who understood they might never see home again. Dr. Sam Rodriguez had moved his research team to Luna Base to work directly with the ship designers. His job was to figure out how to adapt human weapons and technology for fighting aliens whose capabilities they could only guess at. The Kaleri had sent some technical specifications, but their technology was so different from human engineering that translation remained difficult. The breakthrough came when Rodriguez's team tested human kinetic weapons against simulated alien energy shields. The results surprised everyone. While most galactic civilizations had developed sophisticated energy-based weapons and defenses, they seemed to have ignored simple projectile weapons. Human railguns and mass drivers could punch through energy barriers that completely stopped laser and plasma weapons. It makes sense when you think about it, Rodriguez explained to Admiral Thompson during a briefing. If you live on a peaceful world with stable weather, you never develop weapons designed to penetrate thick armor or stone barriers. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons because that's all they've ever faced. Thompson studied the test results with growing excitement. What about our kinetic weapons versus their ship hulls? Even better. The Kaleri sent us metal samples from captured Vorthak ships. Our tungsten penetrator rounds go through their armor like it's made of paper. Their hulls are designed to disperse energy from beam weapons, not stop high-velocity projectiles. This discovery led to a complete redesign of human combat doctrine for space warfare. Instead of trying to match alien energy weapons, Earth's ships would rely on mass drivers, railguns, and missile systems. The Guardian and its 11 sister ships carried thousands of kinetic rounds and hundreds of nuclear missiles modified for space combat. Captain Miller spent his days training with his crew and studying everything the Kaleri had sent about Vorthak tactics. The alien military seemed to rely on overwhelming firepower and superior technology to force quick surrenders. They had never fought a prolonged war against determined resistance. Sergeant Dinah Walsh commanded the Guardian's Marine contingent, 500 soldiers specially trained for boarding actions and planetary assault. Walsh had earned her reputation. Fighting in the asteroid belt conflicts, where combat often took place in zero gravity or on worlds with dangerous atmospheres, her Marines practiced fighting in conditions that would kill most galactic species, preparing for environments where their human adaptability would give them advantages. The Marines' equipment reflected human military philosophy instead of energy. Weapons that might fail in extreme conditions, they carried chemically powered firearms that would work in any environment. Their armor was designed for protection and mobility rather than comfort, with built-in systems that could keep a human alive in space, underwater, or in toxic atmosphers. Lieutenant Chris Brown managed communications between Earth and the Kaleri, establishing regular contact that provided crucial intelligence about the war's progress. The news was not encouraging. Vorthak forces had captured 2 more Kaleri cities, and their orbital bombardment was slowly breaking down the planet's defensive shields. But the communications also revealed something that gave Thompson hope. The Kaleri described how other species had reacted to Vorthak conquest. Most surrendered quickly when faced with superior firepower, choosing survival over resistance. The few that fought back used conventional tactics that the Vorthak easily countered. No one has ever tried guerrilla warfare against them, Thompson realized during a strategy meeting. They're used to fighting civilizations that follow predictable military doctrine. They've never faced an enemy that deliberately chooses dangerous or seemingly impossible tactics. The Kaleri sent more disturbing intelligence about Vorthak psychology. The conquering species seemed to view war as a science with precise rules and predictable outcomes. They calculated victory based on technological superiority and firepower advantages. The concept of an enemy that would fight on despite impossible odds was completely foreign to them. Dr. Rodriguez made another crucial discovery when analyzing Kaleri biological data. Most galactic species had evolved on worlds with gentle climates and few environmental threats. They were physically fragile compared to humans and mentally unprepared for the kind of hardships that Earth-born soldiers considered routine. We can operate in environments that would kill them, Rodriguez explained. Extreme temperatures, toxic atmospheres, high radiation, crushing gravity. These are just Tuesday for human military units, what they consider uninhabitable death zones. We consider tactical opportunities. The implications were staggering. Human forces could fight in areas that aliens would never consider entering. They could survive in conditions that would force alien withdrawal. Most importantly, they could endure casualty rates that would break the morale of species unaccustomed to loss and suffering. As the fleet neared completion, volunteers from across Earth continued arriving at Luna Base, the mission had captured. public imagination in a way that surprised government officials. Humans seemed eager to prove themselves as the defenders of galactic freedom rather than just another conquering species. Thompson received regular updates from other species that the Kaleri had contacted. The insectoid Xanthari from a high-gravity world had begun their own resistance movement, inspired by news of human intervention. The crystalline Morduck were requesting human military advisors. 3 other species had started guerrilla campaigns against Vorthak occupation forces. On the day before departure, Thompson addressed the assembled crews of all 12 ships. 50,000 humans would be traveling to fight a war in defense of aliens they had never met, risking everything for the principle that freedom was worth fighting for regardless of species. "We don't know everything about what we'll face out there," she told them, "but we know that surrender is not in human nature. We know that we've survived everything our world could throw at us. And we know that when someone calls for help, humans answer." The fleet launched that evening, leaving Earth's orbit for the 6-month journey to the Kaleri system. Behind them, construction crews were already beginning work on the next wave of ships. Earth was committed to this war, whatever the cost. As the ships entered hyperspace, Thompson looked at the tactical displays showing their destination, somewhere ahead. An alien species was counting on human ferocity to save them from extinction. She intended to make sure the reputation of Deathworld warriors lived up to the legends. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kaleri system to find a massive battle already in progress. Admiral Thompson watched her screens fill with alien ships locked in desperate combat. The graceful curves of Kaleri vessels glowed with blue energy as they fired at the angular gray hulks of Vorthak warships. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers in the darkness between worlds, and wreckage from destroyed ships drifted through space like metallic snow. Captain Miller stood on the Guardian's bridge watching the tactical display with growing concern. The Kaleri fleet was badly outnumbered, and their ships were taking heavy damage from Vorthak energy weapons. Several alien vessels were already breaking apart, their crews lost to the vacuum of space. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Kaleri command ship," Lieutenant Brown reported from his communications station, the main screen filled with the image of an alien unlike anything humans had ever seen. Captain Zethara of the Kaleri looked like a cross between a dolphin and an octopus, with smooth blue skin and large dark eyes filled with intelligence and desperation. She spoke through a translation device that turned her musical language into urgent English words. "Human fleet, we thank the stars for your arrival," Zethara said. "Our homeworld's shields are failing. The Vorthak have been bombarding our cities for weeks, and our ground defenses cannot hold much longer. We have perhaps 3 days before complete collapse." Thompson opened a channel to reply. "Captain Zethara, this is Admiral Thompson of the Earth Defense Force. We're here to help." "What's the current tactical situation?" The alien commander quickly explained the desperate state of their war. Vorthak forces controlled most of the outer system and had established orbital platforms around the Kaleri homeworld. Their ground troops were preparing for a final assault on the planet's underwater cities, while their fleet prevented any Kaleri ships from escaping or bringing reinforcements. Thompson made her decision quickly. "Captain Miller, take the Guardian and 4 other ships to engage their main fleet. Colonel Parker, prepare your Marines for planetary assault. Captain Davis, begin civilian evacuation procedures. We're going to hit them from 3 directions at once." The first space battle between humans and aliens began 15 minutes later. Captain Miller led his squadron directly toward the largest concentration of Vorthak ships, while the aliens scrambled to respond to this unexpected threat. The enemy vessels were larger than human ships and armed with devastating energy weapons, but they moved with predictable patterns that suggested centuries of fighting similar battles. The Guardian opened fire with its main railgun, sending a tungsten projectile the size of a telephone pole toward a Vorthak cruiser at 30% of light speed. The alien ship's energy shields flared as they tried to stop the incoming round, but the kinetic projectile punched through their defenses like they were made of paper. The tungsten rod tore through the enemy hull, causing massive internal explosions. That broke the ship in half. "Direct hit," reported the Guardian's weapons officer. "Their shields are useless against kinetic weapons." The Vorthak responded by concentrating their energy weapons on the human ships. But Earth's vessels used unpredictable movement patterns that confused the alien targeting systems. Human ships rolled, dove, and accelerated in ways that defied standard fleet tactics, making them nearly impossible to hit with precision weapons designed for conventional warfare. Sergeant Walsh led the first boarding action in galactic history when the Guardian rammed into a disabled Vorthak destroyer. Her Marines used emergency airlocks as entry points, cutting through alien hull plating with plasma torches and pouring into the enemy ship through holes that no sane military commander would consider viable entry routes. The Vorthak crew had never faced close-quarters combat with humans. Walsh and her Marines moved through the alien ship's corridors like deadly shadows, using their superior reflexes and combat training to overwhelm defenders who had expected to fight from safe distances. Within an hour, the humans had captured the entire vessel and taken its crew prisoner on the planet's surface. Colonel Steve Parker's Marines were experiencing their own shocking success. The Kaleri had provided underwater breathing equipment that allowed humans to operate in their flooded cities, but the Marines discovered they could function in environments that would kill most galactic species even without specialized gear. Parker linked up with Kaleri ground forces in the underwater city of Thalander, a magnificent place of coral towers and flowing currents that housed 3 million aliens. The city's defenders were exhausted from weeks of fighting, but their morale improved dramatically when they saw human soldiers arriving to help. The Kaleri warriors were impressed by human adaptability. Parker's Marines had modified their equipment for underwater combat in just hours, while it would have taken most species weeks to adapt to such different conditions. When Vorthak drop pods began landing in the city's central plaza, the combined human-Kaleri force launched a counterattack. That caught the invaders completely unprepared. Vorthak ground troops were designed for fighting on dry land against conventional forces. They wore heavy armor that made them slow underwater, and their energy weapons lost effectiveness in the dense liquid environment. Human Marines, trained for combat in any conditions, moved through the water like deadly fish while their chemically powered weapons worked perfectly regardless of the environment. The battle in Thalander's plaza became a massacre. Vorthak soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds found themselves helpless against an enemy that seemed to thrive in impossible conditions. Human Marines used the city's coral formations for cover, while Kaleri fighters provided support with their knowledge of local terrain. Captain Davis coordinated the evacuation of civilian populations from the most threatened areas. Her ships rescued thousands of Kaleri families from cities under direct bombardment, while human medical teams provided emergency care for wounded aliens using techniques adapted from Earth's battlefield medicine. The combination of human medical knowledge and Kaleri physiology created unexpected synergies. Human doctors found that many Earth medications worked even better on Kaleri biology than on humans, while alien healing techniques accelerated human recovery from injuries that would normally require weeks of treatment. By the end of the first day, the tactical situation had changed dramatically. The human fleet controlled most of the inner system, having destroyed 6 Vorthak vessels and captured 3 more. Ground forces had stopped the alien advance on 2 major cities and rescued over 50,000 civilians from combat zones, but long-range sensors detected troubling news. A massive Vorthak reinforcement fleet was approaching the system, bringing enough firepower to overwhelm even the combined human-Kaleri forces. Admiral Thompson studied the sensor readings with growing concern as she realized this was just the beginning of a much larger war. The Vorthak Empire had never lost a battle, and they were not going to accept defeat from an unknown species without bringing everything they had to bear. Thompson knew that the real test of human military capabilities was still to come, and the fate of multiple civilizations would depend on whether the reputation of Deathworld warriors was truly deserved. 2 weeks after the first battle, Admiral Kate Thompson was dead, and the war had spread beyond anyone's imagination. A Vorthik stealth ship had managed to slip through the human perimeter and launch a suicide attack on the command vessel, killing Thompson and half her staff before being destroyed. Captain Alex Miller found himself promoted to admiral and commanding a coalition that had grown from 2 species to 8 as word of human victories spread across the galaxy. Miller stood in the Guardian's new command center, studying reports. That would have seemed impossible just months ago. The Zenthari, an insectoid race from a high-gravity world, had launched successful rebellions on 3 Vorthik-occupied planets. The crystalline Mordak had destroyed an entire enemy fleet using modified human weapons technology. 6 other species had begun guerrilla campaigns against their occupiers, all inspired by the shocking news that the Vorthik Empire could be defeated. Dr. Lisa Park had joined the expedition as Earth's cultural liaison, working with Kaleri scientists to decode captured Vorthik communications. What they found changed everything humans thought they knew about galactic warfare. The intercepted messages revealed that the Vorthak High Command was in complete panic, unable to understand how their supposedly invincible military machine was being dismantled by unknown primitives. "They're calling us a Class 12 extinction threat," Park explained to Miller during a briefing. "That's the highest danger rating in their system, reserved for species that pose existential threats to galactic civilization. They've never had to use that classification before." The Vorthak messages painted a picture of an empire built on the assumption that all intelligent species would behave predictably. Their entire military doctrine was based on fighting civilizations that followed logical tactical principles and would surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. The concept of an enemy that deliberately chose dangerous, seemingly suicidal tactics was completely outside their experience. Colonel Steve Parker had been promoted to general after his success in the underwater cities, and his ground forces had revolutionized planetary warfare throughout the region. Human Marines were teaching alien fighters how to use guerrilla tactics, turning peaceful species into effective resistance movements that the Vorthak could not counter. The captured Vorthak planetary commander provided intelligence that explained why human tactics were so effective. General Korthax, a massive reptilian warrior who had conquered 17 worlds, admitted during interrogation that Vorthak forces had never faced enemies who deliberately fought in dangerous environments. "Your species chooses to battle in conditions that would kill our soldiers," the alien general told his human captors through a translation device. "We cannot understand why you enter poison zones, fight underwater, or assault positions from directions that guarantee heavy casualties. This is not logical warfare." Parker realized that human willingness to accept extreme risks for tactical advantage was humanity's greatest weapon. Vorthak military planning assumed that all species would avoid unnecessary danger, making certain approaches and positions effectively immune to attack. Human forces routinely used these supposedly safe routes to launch devastating surprise assaults. Sergeant Diana Walsh had become a legend among the coalition forces after leading successful boarding actions against 17 enemy ships. Her Marines had developed techniques for capturing alien vessels that seemed impossible to other species. They would attack through damaged sections, emergency hatches, and maintenance ports that no sane military commander would consider viable entry points. The most shocking success came when Walsh's team captured a Vorthak dreadnought by cutting through its main engine exhaust port while the ship was actively firing its thrusters. The aliens had never considered that any species would be crazy enough to enter an engine exhaust stream, making it completely UNDEFENDED. Captain Nicole Davis had expanded her evacuation operations into a full refugee fleet, rescuing civilians from 6 different worlds under Vorthak attack. Her ships carried over 200,000 aliens of various species, all fleeing the expanding war zone. The refugee camps had become centers of resistance coordination, where freed populations provided intelligence and volunteers for the growing coalition military. The most valuable intelligence came from Vorthak defectors. Aliens who had been forced into military service by their warrior caste government. Dr. Park discovered that many Vorthak were actually pacifists who hated their empire's conquering policies. but had been powerless to resist their military leaders. Their society is divided into rigid castes, Park explained. The warrior caste controls everything, but they're only about 10% of the population. The other 90% are farmers, scientists, and artists who just want to live in peace. They've been waiting centuries for someone strong enough to challenge their military rulers. This revelation led to a complete change in human strategy. Instead of trying to destroy the Vorthak species, coalition forces began targeting only military installations while protecting civilian populations. Human psychological warfare specialists started broadcasting messages to Vorthak civilians, encouraging them to overthrow their own government. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Vorthak civilians began sabotaging military equipment, providing intelligence to coalition forces, and in some cases actively fighting their own soldiers. The Empire's industrial base started collapsing as workers refused to produce weapons for a war they opposed. Admiral Miller received reports that 3 Vorthak industrial worlds had declared independence from the Empire and requested coalition protection. The warrior caste was discovering that their power depended on the cooperation of civilians who no longer feared them enough to obey. The turning point came when human special forces, working with Kaleri underwater specialists and Xanthari tunnel fighters, successfully infiltrated the main Vorthak communications hub. The joint team destroyed the Empire's ability to coordinate their scattered fleets, leaving individual commanders to fight without support or strategic direction. But the most important development was happening on Earth itself. News of the Galactic War had unified humanity in ways that centuries of Earth conflicts had failed to achieve. Every nation contributed ships, soldiers, and resources to the coalition effort. Human industrial capacity, originally designed to support a single world, was being rapidly converted to supply military forces across multiple star systems. Miller studied the strategic reports with growing amazement. What had started as a rescue mission for one alien species had become a galactic liberation movement. Human military advisors were now working with resistance groups in dozens of star systems, while Earth shipyards worked around the clock to build vessels for allied fleets. The Vorthak Empire, which had seemed invincible just months ago, was collapsing from within as its subject populations learned that rebellion was possible. But Miller knew that the warrior caste would not surrender easily. Intelligence reports indicated that they were gathering their remaining forces for a final, massive assault, planning to destroy as many worlds as possible before their empire fell. The real test was still coming, and Miller found himself commanding the largest military coalition in galactic history as they prepared for what might be the final battle of a war that had changed the galaxy forever. The legend of the Deathworlders had become reality, but the price of victory was still to be determined. 6 months after Admiral Thompson's death, the largest fleet in galactic history gathered at the edge of the Vorthak home system. Admiral Alex Miller commanded over 3,000 ships from 12 different species, with humans serving as tactical coordinators for an alliance that would have been impossible before the war began. The mission was not conquest but liberation, designed to topple the warrior caste government and establish a peaceful regime that would free the Vorthak civilians from centuries of oppression. The final battle began at dawn on Vorthak Prime, massive gray world covered in military installations and industrial complexes. Unlike previous campaigns where the goal was to drive out invaders, this assault required precision strikes that would destroy the military leadership while protecting millions of innocent civilians who had never wanted war. General Steve Parker commanded the largest ground invasion force ever assembled, with human marines working alongside Kaleri underwater specialists, Xanthari tunnel fighters, insectoid soldiers from 6 different worlds, and even Vorthak defectors who had joined the coalition. The diversity of the force reflected how much the galaxy had changed since humans first answered the Kaleri distress call. The space battle that erupted around Vorthak Prime involved over 5,000 ships and lasted for 18 hours. Human tactical doctrine had spread throughout the coalition, with alien vessels using unpredictable movement patterns and kinetic weapons that the defending Vorthok forces still could not effectively counter. The sight of Kaleri ships firing human-designed railguns while Zentari fighters used hit-and-run tactics would have been unimaginable before the war. Dr. Lisa Park worked from a command ship in orbit, coordinating with Vorthok civilian resistance groups who had been secretly organizing for months. Her broadcasts to the planet's population had convinced millions of aliens to rise up against their own military government, creating chaos behind enemy lines that made the invasion possible. The most crucial moment came when Sergeant Diana Walsh led a joint special forces team into the Imperial Command Center, the massive fortress that housed the Vorthok High Command. The team included humans, Kaleri, Zentari, and 3 Vorthok defectors who knew the building's layout. Getting inside required tactics that perfectly demonstrated why humans had earned their reputation as Deathworlders. The fortress was supposedly impregnable, protected by energy shields, automated defenses, and thousands of elite guards. Walsh's team reached it by crawling through maintenance tunnels filled with poisonous gas, swimming through flooded sewage systems, and finally cutting through the building's main power conduits while electrical current flowed through them. Most species would have died attempting any one of these approaches, but humans had trained for exactly these kinds of impossible conditions. The capture of the Vorthok leadership happened faster than anyone expected. When Walsh and her team burst into the command center, they found the alien generals in complete disarray, unable to coordinate their defenses against enemies who refused to follow conventional military logic. The sight of humans emerging from an electrical conduit that should have killed them broke the last of the Vorthok command's morale. Supreme General Vaskter, the leader of the warrior caste, surrendered within hours of the command center's capture. The massive reptilian alien admitted through translators that his forces could not fight enemies, who seemed to thrive on impossibility. The concept of soldiers who deliberately chose the most dangerous approach to every problem was beyond his understanding. Captain Nicole Davis, now promoted to Admiral of the Coalition's diplomatic corps, negotiated the surrender terms from her flagship orbiting the planet. The agreement was revolutionary by galactic standards, requiring the Vorthok Empire to release all conquered worlds, provide reparations to damaged civilizations, and transition to a democratic government overseen by representatives from the liberated species. The most important part of the agreement established the Galactic Council, a new organization designed to prevent future wars of conquest. Earth was given a permanent seat on the council, along with representatives from every species that had participated in the liberation. The humans who had started as rescuers had become the founders of a new galactic government. 3 years later, Ambassador Lisa Park stood before the Galactic Council on Kaleri Prime, addressing delegates from 47 different worlds. The chamber was a marvel of interspecies cooperation, with sections designed for aquatic Kaleri, high-gravity Zentari, crystalline Mordock, and dozens of other species who had never worked together before the war. Park's speech marked the 3rd anniversary of the first human victory and the establishment of what historians were already calling the Liberation War. The galaxy had been transformed from a collection of isolated species, living in fear of conquest, into a cooperative alliance dedicated to mutual protection and peaceful development. 3 years ago, humanity received a call for help from people we had never met, Park told the assembly. We answered that call not because we expected rewards, but because freedom is worth fighting for regardless of species. Today, we celebrate not just victory in war, but the birth of a galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. The most visible symbol of the new order was the Galactic Defense Force. Commanded by Fleet Admiral Alex Miller from his headquarters on Luna Base, the force included ships and personnel from every member species, all trained in the tactical doctrines that had proven so effective against the Vorthok Empire. Human military academies had been established on dozens of worlds, where officers from across the galaxy learned the art of what was now called Deathworlder warfare, but the real change was deeper than military tactics. The war had proven that peaceful species could defend themselves when they worked together and refused to accept defeat. The Vorthok warrior caste's greatest weapon had been the assumption that civilized beings would always choose survival over resistance. Once that assumption was broken, their entire system of conquest became impossible. The transformation of the Vorthik themselves was perhaps the most remarkable development. With their military government overthrown, the planet had become a center of art, science, and philosophy. The species that had once terrorized the galaxy now contributed some of its most innovative thinkers and creative artists. Former warriors worked alongside their former enemies to build a better future for all species. As Park concluded her speech, a new distress signal arrived at the council chambers. Somewhere in an unexplored sector of the galaxy, another species was calling for help against unknown threats. The message was familiar, but this time it carried a difference that made everyone smile. The new distress call specifically requested assistance from the Galactic Defense Force and mentioned that they had heard the legends of the Deathworlders who fought for freedom rather than conquest. Admiral Miller received the signal with the same grim smile that had become famous throughout the galaxy. Earth had begun this journey as an isolated world, answering a desperate plea for help. Now humanity served as the guardians of galactic freedom, leading an alliance dedicated to ensuring that no species would ever again face extinction alone. The work of the Deathworlders was far from over, but the galaxy was no longer the same dark place where the strong preyed upon the weak. Wherever the next call for help came from, it would be answered not by a single species, but by an entire galactic civilization united in the belief that freedom was worth any sacrifice.